He's like, it's brand new. He's like, the song's brand new. Like, did it just come out? He's like, no, it's not. The band is brand new. Like, oh, it's a brand new band. And she's like in the backseat, like laughing her head off. Awesome.
All right, guys, let's jump back into it. So I want to finish up just a couple of things, thoughts about agent, rep, that kind of stuff. So again, what most established agents are going to be looking for is somebody who's actually already got something that they can bring to the party. So for instance, in my case, I've already got a roster of clients that I could actually go to an agency and say, in return for taking me on, you will get 25% of this. Now, a lot of that gets broken down different ways, treated differently. So the way I would approach that in my particular situation is the fact that I've already got accounts, the fact that I've already got clients, those would be considered house accounts. And those would probably be, I would probably pay them a different rate for my house account. So instead of, again, paying them the typical 25 to 30% on my creative fee, in all likelihood for a house account, I would be giving them more 10 to 15% for it. Because again, I'm the one I've already got the account. They're not doing anything for me. They would service the account, but they're really not helping me do anything more to that. But it's an incentive for them to then take me on and try to develop me to get more business out of it. I can tell you right now, out of the 15 agents that I've had over the years, I've only had one that was a true moneymaker for me. And she didn't really do it so much as it wasn't so much that she was really, really good at bringing in new business, but she was probably the single best negotiator I've ever seen in my life. And she and I made a lot of money together. So at any rate, I don't have the best experience with agents, and I don't know any photographer that does. It's like insurance. They're sort of a necessary, or can be thought of as more of a necessary evil. Does that mean you have to have an agent to do it? No, it doesn't. It just means you've got to you've got to wear more than one hat. You've got to be the photographer, but you've also got to be the person that's out there selling yourself. Sometimes there is an inherent advantage to having somebody doing that work for you because it separates you from what's being sold. So instead of you saying to a prospective client, hey, I'm an amazing photographer, I'm really great, I'll make you, I'll do incredible work for you, blah, blah, blah. You got somebody else who's doing it for you as an advocate. So it sounds a little less egocentric to do it that way, somewhat. I mean, you guys see where this is beginning to go, right? But 25 to 30% is a very steep price to pay. However, there are a couple other things that you should consider negotiating in all of that as well. And I never did this in the beginning of my career, but I sure did it by the end. The expenses that it's actually going to cost you to do the marketing, in most cases, that falls on the photographer alone. I don't do it that way anymore. What I do with agencies is I tell them that we'll do the same split. So if I'm going to spend $8,000 to design to have a new website designed, they're going to spend 25 or 30%. They're going to pay 25 or 30% of that. I'll pay the other part, but again, the income and the expenses work pretty much the same as far as that part goes. For promotion, now that's not going to have anything, they're not going to pay 25% of my studio rental. They're not going to pay 25% of my camera gear rental. But promotion is something that they're directly relates directly to them. They benefit from that, so I see absolutely no reason that we don't split that money evenly down the line. Make sense?
So whatever they give you, or like charge you a percentage of.
Exactly, and that's what they would be for things that apply to the both of us. Right, promotion, website, exactly. E-blasting, a direct mail campaign, all of that kind of stuff would be considered promotion. I would expect them to pick up their percentage of that. Another thing that you need to consider in doing all of this is that you this is a two-way street. You need to be concerned about the image and the reputation of the agency. Do you want to go with that type of agency? So, are you the person who signs on with a Bernstein Andreuli, which is a top agency in New York, but they've got hundreds, if not thousands of talent that they represent. They're very business, pinstripe suit, that's who they are. Is that who you sign with? Because then that becomes your image, right? That's who you're represented by, has as much statement about your brand as anything else you do. Or do you go with a Judy Casey, who's like the hippest, youngest, absolutely on fire agency? Or are you lucky enough to get with Art and Commerce, which is where all the superstars are? That's where Stephen Meisel is, and Emmy Leibovitz, and Stephen Klein, and Craig McLean, and You know, so who you go with has an enormous amount, says an enormous amount about you. It's part of who you are, right? The flip side to that holds true as well. When you were actually looking for an agency, you've got to realize that the way you project yourself is something that they are going to take into consideration in terms of whether they take you on to represent you or not. So, is it the kind of agency that's going to take really hip, young, burning, cutting-edge crowd, somebody just out of school? Or are they only looking for, you know, somebody in their 50s, seasoned pro, who's got 1 million accounts already? And that's, so all of this comes into play when you're thinking about doing this, right? So it's just something to keep in mind as far as that whole part goes. So again, having an agent can be a very positive thing, but it's certainly no guarantee of success. It won't replace you doing your work and having a killer portfolio, etc. Okay, so let's get back down to the whole cost of doing business. Like I said, we'll actually I'll take a look at the way you guys calculated this out. We will do another calculation of that later on after we talk about a couple of other things. But what the cost of doing business was designed to do was to give you guys a threshold, a bottom line that you would not go under, or that you can't go under. So in most cases, again, a lot of cases that we typically see here is a typical cost of living doing business in a yearly situation is usually somewhere in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. It might go as high as 50. What does that mean for you then as your day rate? Now again, I use that word only to be used in this classroom. I'm telling you right now, if I hear any of you use the word day rate outside of the 14, 15 people that are sitting here right now, I will come up and bitch slap you so hard, I will knock your teeth out. Day rate is the single most destructive concept that you can actually have in your business. You will never, ever, ever quote a day rate again in your life if I have anything to say about it. It is how you lose business. It's how you don't make money. Yes?
Even as an assistant?
Well, no, not as an assistant. They're going to ask you for a rate as an assistant. I'm talking about actually doing photography now, generating photographs, right? So your cost of doing business is to set the basement of what you need in a given day. Now, I prefer to think of this as your creative fee, not as your day rate. So again, you would think about it in the terms of a job. So you would say to yourself, okay, I came up with $35,000 a year. That's my cost of that's my cost of doing business. I figure I might be able to grab 100 days doing, again, photography. Now, as a photo assistant, you could conceivably do a whole lot more than, as a photo assistant, you could conceivably do 200 days in a year. But as a photographer, that's really ambitious because, again, as a photographer, typically speaking, for every day you shoot, you're going to have a day of pre-pro and you're going to have a day of post. So if you shoot 100 days in a year, that's taking up 300 days of your time. How much more time do you really have? Now,
By the day of post, would you like retouch it?
it could be retouching, it can be billing, it can be invoicing, it could be getting the next client, it could be entering your books, paying your bills. It's just how it sort of like works out. You know, the more you're working, the more it's generating work that you have to do to support that. So it's just, this is no hardcore rule, it's just a sort of a rule of thumb. It gives you guys some foundation to start working with this, right? Because I think all of you coming into this, I don't know what your other classes taught you, but I think coming into this, most of them were just, it's this sort of vague notion about, oh yeah, I gotta make more money than I spend, and that's how it goes, whatever. I'm trying to give a little bit more concrete reality to your world and to what it's gonna be like when you get out there and the ways that you can actually think about doing this. Does that sort of make sense? So I'm trying to put something, again, I'm trying to put harder core numbers to this, but by definition, by its very nature, it's impossible to like pin this down. I can't look at Chelsea and say, I know you're gonna work 100 days next year, and therefore your cost of living doing business, because you came up with $35,000 for the year, so you have to charge $350 a day for doing that. I can't say that to her, but there's a certain truth to that. There is going to be a certain truism to that. It is not going to be that far off for her, right? Now again, working as an assistant changes things completely, and you guys are gonna, in all likelihood, the way I ended up working for me, that's how it happened for me. I got out of school, I got a job as an assistant, I spent 3 years assisting, and then I transitioned into being a photographer. I spent a year roughly doing both. I would take assisting jobs and do photography work as well. And then after that 4th year, I said, absolutely not, I'm not assisting anymore. anymore. I'm just going to shoot. So how do you know when that moment comes? The way a lot of people would look at it, the way most people would peg this, is when you're at the stage that you know you can do at least as good a work as the photographer that you're working with. When you hit that point, you say, yes, I can do those jobs. That's the point where you need to start showing your book around, specifically to his clients or her clients. Now, that is not something you do in front of them. That is not something that you do while you're on a shoot as a photo assistant. By the way, I got my book here. Could you take a look at it? Not cool. However, and I tell everybody this, and it's so true. Who do you guys hire right now to help you do your photo shoots? Right. If things go on, things progress like you hope they do, and things get better and better and better, and you're making more money, the jobs get bigger and bigger and bigger, who do you still think you're going to hire at the end of the day to help you do those jobs? Your friends. Now, hopefully your friend is a really good hair and makeup artist, or a really good set builder, or a really good whatever, but in the end, you end up developing these relationships with these people, and those are the people that you hire. So part of your job as an assistant is to engage with the people who ultimately could give you work. So in the course of building that relationship, at some point you should feel comfortable saying to them, you know, if it's okay with you, I would love to come by and show you some of the work that I'm doing sometime. I don't want to take any of Bill's work here, but I'm doing some really interesting things I would love to come show you. Separate and away from the studio, and everybody in the world will say yes. And then you get to go in and see them and develop that relationship further as a photographer, and hopefully then take off. And you bridge that. So again, starting out as an assistant, into a bridge period, and then eventually into a photographer. That's how most people I know have done it. Make sense? So again, all of this costing that we're going to be doing out is going to have an impact with that. But getting back to the photography end of it, not the assisting end of it. Now we're actually going to move on, because you guys need to start thinking about that part of it, because right out the gate, I hope all of you are, I mean, some of you are already shooting at your weddings and all that. I know you guys are already shooting. But so you come up with your cost of doing business. That is what I consider to be your creative fee. And it would be per day, because that's how you figured it out. You figured out, okay, it's $35,000 a year, it's 100 days, my rate is $350 a day, but you would never quote it as a day. You need to now start thinking about quoting things as the job. So, and this starts to get into this whole tricky area of this, but this is how you can actually make money. The single most important thing about making money, and it's usage. How are your images going to be used? And that determines everything. It doesn't matter any longer how long it took you to make an image. It only matters in what's going to be done with that image. Make sense? So we're going to get into this deep, just sort of like planting the seeds for this part, sort of like right here in the beginning. So you do have to have some idea of your cost of doing business. You have to have some idea of what your sort of beginning threshold is. And then we need to consider all sorts of other things that are going to actually come into this, ultimately what it is you charge for a job. So in the beginning, a lot of you are going to be inclined to not charge what it is you should be charging. And there are reasons to actually do that. So for instance, you've got an opportunity to meet somebody new and to get an extraordinary piece for your portfolio. Are you willing to actually work less than your cost of doing business? Sure, but can you do that over and over and over? You can. You can do some of it, but you can't do it all the time. If you do it all the time, you will go to business because you're not making enough money to actually stay in the business. But I tell people this all the time. If I got the chance to shoot a cover for Vogue, I would pay them. I would. Right now, on this day, I swear to God, right to you, every party in this room, whatever, and how much would you think I would pay to do that? I drop $50,000 at the drop of a hat to do a cover for Vogue right now, because that my career would skyrocket. Would that $50,000 be worth it? Worth every penny. So there are occasions that it's things that are actually worth it to actually do that. There are other things that can actually be worth it. Credit line. Credit line is great if you get a byline in there, photography buy on something that's really important. That would be great, but you can't eat credit lines. They don't put any money in the bank. So again, all of these things are valuable on some level, but you have to be judicious about how much of this you do, how much of it you don't do. This is a complete aside right now, but I will tell you this. People value photography based exactly on what they pay for it. So I'm going to ask this question to you guys, and some of you have been in one of my other classes. You may have heard this one before, so if you have, don't let other people answer. If I'm holding 2 photographs behind my back, and one in my left hand is worth $1,000, it cost me $1,000, the one in my right hand cost me $100, which is the better photograph? The left? Wait, the $100 one's better than the $1,000 one? One of them cost me $1,000. I paid $1,000 for it. The other I paid $100 for it. I'm just asking you, which is the better photograph? No opinions?
Now you're making me think of those, but I was thinking
Oh, certainly they could be, right? But clearly I valued one more than the other, 10 times more than the other. So in my mind, which one do you think is better? Of course, the $1,000 one, right? And this is just the truism of business. Whatever people pay for photographs is how they value them. So if you make me pay $10,000 for an image, it's going to be worth, it's going to be a better image. Whether it's worth it to me or not, in my mind, it's going to be a better image than the one I spent $1,000 on. And it's going to be even way better than the one I spent $10 on. And the ultimate irony of all of this is that, or what I'm trying to bring down to this, is that for a while in my career, I actually did pro bono work. I did a lot of work for Partners in Drug Free America. I did stuff for abuse shelters, for abused women, all this stuff, whatever, all pro bono. And they were the shittiest, most ungrateful, fucking asshole, kick them in the up, hate them clients that you could have. And you want to know why? Because they weren't paying anything for those photographs, and so those photographs were worth nothing to them. So was the photographer who shot them. Yeah. So at any rate, keep that part in mind, because in setting your rate, there is an advantage to actually charging more than you think it's worth. And ironically, it's because the images that you make will actually be considered to be better images. Okay, I didn't lose anybody on that one, did I? Okay, so with this all being said, we're going to talk about, again, sort of like what usage really is. And so this part matters. I'm going to try to give you guys an example, and we'll sort of see where we go with this. So I'm actually asked to shoot a picture of a CEO. It's a portrait of a CEO. And I'm asked to do that picture, and I agree to do it. And they say, well, what's it going to cost to do that? And I think in my mind, okay, what's it going to be? What are you going to do with it? And they say, well, it's going to be a local publication. It's going to be Crane's Business. No, it's going to be for Chicago Magazine. It's going to be Chicago Magazine. So I know right off the bat, it's a local market. It doesn't have national publication distribution. It certainly doesn't have world distribution. It's going to be a relatively small market. How many people, how many issues of Chicago Magazine are there? I don't know. What's their publication? 50,000 copies, maybe. I don't know. I would actually find that out. So I take a picture, and it's a portrait of Rahm Emanuel. That's who I do the portrait of. So what do I charge them? Well, again, I would look at my creative fee, my bottom line creative fee. So that's my $350, right? But then I think to myself, well, what's this really worth to them? What is the value of this image to them? And I would then try everything I could to figure out what do they pay, what do they pay other photographers for similar work? What do they? You try to canvas all of this stuff out. What do they pay? Most magazines actually pay page rate, what they call a page rate. So it's just a rate that they pay depending on the size of the page, how big the image is. Does it take a full page? Is it a quarter page, half a page, that kind of stuff. When I worked for Playboy, their page rate was $800 a page. So that's what we would get paid if we had a full spread. That's what they would actually pay. So I would try to work all that out. So I go and do the job. It takes me 2 hours to do it, and I get paid for that. Now, it only took me 2 hours to do it. Does that mean I only charge them a quarter of my day? No, that would be ridiculous. I'm going to charge them the full price for the day, right? And then I'm going to charge them something more than that because of the value that this photograph is to them, their usage. Does that make sense? So the very same photograph, but all of a sudden Rahm is caught, I don't know, he's caught doing something, and he becomes big news. And Time Magazine calls me up and says, we hear you have images of Rahm Emanuel, and we want to run him on the cover of Time Magazine. Will you sell us the picture? Or sell us the right to use it? And I go, sure. Now, do you think I'm going to charge him the exact same thing I charged Chicago Magazine? Absolutely not. It's the same fucking picture, but it's not going to cost the same. So what ultimately I'm trying to get you guys to take away from this is that the usage, how it's actually used, has got everything to do with the image and nothing to do with how long it took you to make it, what it's of, all of those things. None of those things matter. It's what is actually going to be done with it. So this is what I need you to start thinking about. We're going to take a quick little step back here and talk about copyright for just 1 second, because copyright falls into all of this, and this part becomes really incredibly important. In copyright, when you make a picture, you have the copyright to that picture. You own that picture. Let me see if I'm getting too far ahead of myself here, guys. Hang on just 1 second. Yeah, no, I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. Okay. So it's just the nature of copyright, the way it works. When you actually generate a picture, the second you snap that shutter, you own the copyright to what you just created. Which means you have the rights to that. You have the rights to everything about that picture. You get to say how it's used, where it's used, when it's used, how often it's used, who can use it. You control all of that. You can actually then sell the rights to actually do things with your pictures. That is what usage is. So I take the picture of Rahm Emanuel. I control everything about that picture. I can then sell somebody the right to use that picture. I can say to Chicago Magazine, you have the right to use this in the inside of your magazine, a quarter page, no more, for this amount of money. And you can do it for 1 month. Okay, you can't use it on your website. You can't use it in advertising. You can't. I mean, I can control everything about it. Does that make sense for where we're going with here? Okay, so, however, and this is a tricky thing about copyright. You own the copyright, and everybody will acknowledge that you own the copyright to this. However, if they violate your copyright, let's say they use it and they do other things with it, they use it in a much bigger space, in a much bigger way, they run it on the cover, it's all over their website, they do billboards of it, and it's in every tag, every insert that they have to advertise the magazine for the next 10 years is your picture, and they absolutely abuse your copyright. You can sue them for that. However, if you have not registered your copyright with the government, you cannot take them into court. You own the copyright, everybody acknowledges that, but they will not let you walk into court to pursue a copyright suit unless that image has been literally copyrighted with you file your copyright with the Library of Congress. Yes.
So if you not have it filed, then use it, you file it, and then take them to court?
It gets tricky because conceivably they could file and claim that they own the copyright before you do. And the fact that they are in possession of that image, and this is going to become, it used to be in the old days it wasn't as bad because they wouldn't have the original negatives. But in this day and age, it's digital. And if you've given them a raw digital file that doesn't have your copyright embedded in it somehow, they can actually claim it as their own and get their copyright in before yours, and then they can turn around and sue you for your picture. Yes? Yeah, and didn't you guys all learn that in foundations class here in photography, that the first thing you do on importing your photographs is to actually insert the copyright information into the metadata? Oh, again, the issue with registering with the government is pure and simply you cannot pursue a case in court. They will not let you go. If you go into court, and the judge will say, the first question that he will ask you is, have you registered this with the Copyright Office? And if you say no, they'll say goodbye. It's a waste of our time, not going down that road. Well, these are things that you should register for and not register for, right? I've shot 100,000 pairs of khaki pants, Dockers from the waist down. I have not copyrighted not the first one of them. Wasted my time. Don't really care. However, and the thing about, again, in this for you guys, especially for fashion photographers, this gets to be a little trickier. But the thing about fashion is that for the most part, fashion is obsolete after 6 months. Nobody wants it after 6 months. So nobody steals it after 6 months. So it's a completely different thing than somebody who's shooting, say, really high-end advertising that would actually have a lifespan. Or let's say even if I was doing beauty, but it was like for perfume advertising or that kind of stuff, it could really have legs. It could really go on for 3, 4, 5 years, or there would be value to somebody else to actually pick up. Then there's an incentive for me to actually be copywriting that kind of thing.
How expensive and how hard is it to do that?
It's actually not that expensive at all. And we're not going to talk about registering copyright tonight because I want to get through the reason you actually want to do that, and then we'll look at the actual process of doing it next week. But we'll go through all the steps and I'll show you. Now because everything is digital, it's a whole lot easier than it used to be. You actually used to have to send them actual prints. You don't have to do that anymore. Okay, but the point that I'm trying to, again, get you guys to understand is that because you own this stuff, what you are allowing people to do is use it. You are not giving it to them. They don't own it. They are never going to own it. And the reason I bring this up at this stage of the game is that there's a lot of clients who do not understand that right out of the gate. And so part of your job is to actually educate yourself first about what's really involved in this, and then educate the clients. So for those of you who shoot weddings, how many people approach you and think that you're supposed to be giving them all the files after it's shot? Right? Happens all the time, right? And do you? Of course not, right? But I'm sure that that's not something that you talk about after you've shot the wedding. It's probably the conversation that you have before, or it should be, and you should be saying to them, I'm shooting this, these are my images, this is my intellectual property, and I am more than happy to let, you can have this, we'll talk about how many prints you want and all, and all that kind of stuff. I'm happy to do that, but this is my business, this is what I do, I own these images, and I want to do this and this and this, I want to still be able to do that, right? So, in the beginning, and not necessarily only in the beginning, because this still happens to me in this day and age, whatever, there's companies that are going to try to hire you and they're going to try to circumvent this. Because if they can't circumvent this, then usage goes out the window. So the first way most companies actually go after doing this is a thing called work for hire. You will see this in every single contract somebody tries to get you. So somebody's going to call you up and say, we want you to do this job, what's it going to cost? And you'll tell them what it's going to cost, and you're saying, well, this is my creative fee, this is the usage fee, and they'll all say, that's fine, blah, 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 blah. And then they'll send you a contract, and in that contract there will be a clause that says this is work for hire. And what that actually means is that they've agreed to pay you your price, but that they own the product of what you do. So in a sense, they own the copyright. They are the copyright holder, not you. You were hired to do an image for them, and in that process, and you will see, again, you will see work for hire in every single contract. I don't care who it is, every ad agency, every retailer, everybody is going to send you, there's going to be a work for hire clause in there. I'm just telling you to look out for this now, because if that's the case, not only do they get to use your image in any way they want to, you don't get to use your image at all, because you don't own it. They own it. You were hired to do it for them. Does that make sense? So, and when I say you can't use it in your portfolio, you can't use it on your website without permission from them. And the irony of all of this is that you can actually end up having to pay them to use your image for your own promotion. Oh, I sign them all the time. That's a great question. I'm doing Dockers from the waist down. You're going to pay me $3,500 a day to do that? I'll sign anything. I don't care about those images. I am never going to use them. I don't care about keeping them. I don't want them. I don't need them on my hard drive. I don't care about them ever again. I just want the money. So I am more than willing to hire that. Sure, you can have the copyright to those images. I can care less. But the flip side of that is I am shooting pictures of Rahm Emanuel, or I am shooting, this remarkable beauty campaign, or I'm doing something like that. Do I want to keep those images? Yes. In all likelihood, there's a good chance that I do want to keep those images. Yes.
So then do you cross out that in your...
Okay, no, that's a great point. That's exactly what happens, is that every contract in the world is negotiable. And there's no reason that if you feel like that you are being, because again, what they're trying to do is everybody does this. Everybody's taking into account the fact that nobody wants to read a contract. Everybody just signs them. So if they can slip this clause in and get you to sign it, boom, you're out of the loop. They'll pay you your fee. They'll pay you what you ask them to pay you for, because that'll also be part of the contract. But then they own it. So anyway, I'm just telling you it's something to look out for. Again, if you don't care about the work, then I don't hesitate that there would be no reason for me to take it out. If I did care about the work, then maybe I would actually negotiate a higher price and say, well, okay, if you're interested in doing that, I'm going to double my rate. And if you want to pay me twice, I'll sign your work for hire clause. Make sense?
What about people that they ask for hire, but I do have permission to put my contract?
Again, anything can be negotiated, but that would be something you have to have specified in the contract. So, a great thing to know about contracts, if you're going to change them, which you can do, you can actually go in and that beautiful typed up contract, you can go in and scratch shit out with a pen and write more shit in with a pen. If you do that though, you should do it in pen, not in pencil. And both you and the client, or whoever you're negotiating this with, need to initial every amendment, everything that's changed. So any line that gets crossed out, there's 2 sets of initials, yours and the client. If there's anything that's added, there's 2 sets of initials, yours and the client. So it's just proof, it's an indication that, yes, we talked about this together, we both agreed on this, I didn't just start striking shit out after I left. All right. So there's another case where you actually do not have the right to use your pictures, and that's when you were actually hired by a company and you do the pictures in their employ. So for instance, Shock Studios here employs full-time photographers, actually part-time employs full-time photographers. Pretty much everybody I know in the business right now has some full-time photographers that are actually, they work for them full-time, they're paid benefits, they get a salary, they get a W-2, they're not freelance, they get all the whole 9 yards, they actually work for them. Every photograph that is made in the employment of somebody else in that situation is actually also considered the employee's property. It's not the photographer's property. Now, if you're a freelancer, that's never going to be the case for you. You're never in the employ of somebody else. Make sense? So again, that's why they'll try to throw the work for hire clause at you if that actually happens. So again, you don't have to register your work with the Copyright Office, but you certainly have to do it if you are going to pursue legal action.
What if your image was taken off the internet
That is a violation of your copyright.
and you haven't registered and it's been a little while?
Then you can register at any time, but then again, are you going to, when do you take them into court? And there's something else you guys should know about court, as long as we're going to go down this road. So none of it's impossible to do. Again, if you feel like you've really been violated and it's really worth something, then I would register my copy right now and I would go after it. But it's something that you should know about court. Anything that's under $5,000, you can go into court yourself. It's a little more glorified than Judge Judy, but you go in and you represent yourself. And whoever you're suing, either brings in a lawyer or they just come in themselves as well. It's, again, small claims court. You can't go over $5,000 to do this, but you don't have to have a lawyer. You can do it all on your own. And they have to show up. I mean, the court will compel them to show up, or the court can find in favor of you, right? So $5,000 or less. Between $5,000 and $50,000, they call this this is what my lawyer, this was the original donut hole, this is the original no man's land. Between $5,000 and $50,000, you can also go into court, but you have to have a lawyer. And you will pay that lawyer every single penny that you make. You will not see a dime out of that. It's only when you get above the $50,000 mark, when you still have to have a lawyer, that you actually stand a chance to make money. But I'm telling you this right now, if you go into court and you sue somebody for $35,000, $40,000, and they find in favor of you, your lawyer is going to take every single penny of that in fees, and you will end up with nothing. I'm just telling you that's just, I've heard this 1,000 times. I'm telling you it again. Yes?
So that would only be just for my client.
Yeah, but do you really want to do that? Again, yeah, I mean, no, you spend your time and your money, and you might lose. And if you lose, then you're going to have to pay your lawyer all that money, and you're going to go into debt. So, I'm just telling you, litigation is a very dangerous game to play. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't, because if you've been wrong, if you indeed have been wrong, and you are entitled to compensation, I believe you should go after that. I really do. But I'm just telling you that what you go after is either a very small amount or a very large amount. But the stuff in between, you're never going to get. And so you need to consider that. The other thing you need to consider is that what can you really sue for? So what are the people who've stolen your image off the internet done with it?
The use of news articles.
So in news articles, right? And so basically, you then would have to look at that and say, what value did they get out of that? For instance, if they had to hire you to actually do that image again, what would it cost them to do that? Right? $500, $1,000, whatever. Whatever that's going to be, that's what you can sue them for. So that part's you got to keep all of that in mind. And in most cases, it's simply not worth it. However, I've got a really good friend who did a whole ad campaign for Standard Oil. Standard Oil? No, Shell Oil. And he shot all these pictures, and 3 years after he had done, he had signed, he'd given him 6 months, years usage, something like that. He was driving somewhere, and he saw there was a whole set, they launched a whole other campaign 3 years later, and it was all these cards that were on top of the gas pumps. And it ended up being all over the world. And he sued them for $150,000, $200,000, whatever, and he won this huge chunk of money. So, I mean, it's indeed possible to do. It's just you've got to know. It's not, but it's when to do it. It's at what level do you have to do it at? And for the most part, it's when you're going for really big money is when this is of value to you. And was it of value to them? Of course. I mean, they've had this stuff. You know, there was millions of copies of this ad all over every Shell Oil all over the world, and it was worth a whole lot to them, and he did very, very well. So when we talk about this whole idea of usage, what we're really talking about, and the thing that you need to figure, and the thing that becomes the moneymaker for you guys, is how you come up with selling this, how you put a value on what they're going to actually do with it, how they're going to actually use this thing. That's the tricky part about setting this stuff up and sort of costing all of this out. Does that make sense? So there are a couple of things that you can think about when doing that. The way that we tend to think about it in terms of the criteria that you should be thinking about. When you think about usage, the first thing people usually think about is scale. So how big is whatever it is you're going to do? So we talk about how you actually measure that. So in terms of measuring it, one of the first things that comes to mind, or one of the easiest things that comes to mind is geographic location. So is it going to be local? Is it Chicago only? Is it going to be national, United States only? Is it going to be international but restricted? So it's going to be the entire United States and Europe, but not Asia. Is it going to be worldwide? Is it going to be internet? Internet by definition is worldwide. So those issues, that's one of the criteria you actually have to think about. The second one in terms of scaling that you need to think about is how big is it? So is it going to be some little quarter-page ad in the back of a magazine? Or is it a full-page ad that's going to run in hundreds of magazines? So again, the scaling of this is critical in terms of your thinking about it. In terms of the number of copies of it, how much is that going to generate, right? So if you've got an ad, for instance, it's running in, let's say it's running in, they're going to do it in billboards in every major city in the United States. Everything in the United States is a city of about 500,000 people. How many billboards does that mean? Is that different than having the very same picture run in Vogue? Well, what's the circulation for Vogue? Well, how many Vogues are copied? How many copies of Vogue are actually generated? Anybody in here know? Typical size of a Vogue U.S. American magazine monthly issue. 1,200,000 copies, typical. Does that mean that's what you charge for, is 1,200,000 copies? Well, the truth of it is there's a pass-around rate. For every copy of Vogue that's actually bought or printed, they figure there's more than one set of eyeballs that actually see it. So if you figure there's a double rate on that, you figure, well, it's not 125,000, or 1,250,000, it's actually double that. It's 2.5 million. That's how many eyeballs are going to see this. So your usage, again, is charged depending on the scale of all of this. Does this make sense where we're going with all of this? So I'm going to give you ways to actually map all this out and figure this out and calculate this. The next one that you need to consider is time. how long is this going to happen? Is this going to be one issue, one time only? Is this going to be a 6-month usage? Is this going to be a year? Typically in fashion, the most you'll ever get out of it is 6 months usage. But if you're shooting a perfume ad, those things can run 3, 4, 5 years. If you're doing cigarette ads, those can run 10 years. Anybody in this room unwilling to shoot a cigarette ad? Just curious. So you don't mind killing children? The ethics of it all we'll leave for another time and another place. So at any rate, you see that how this can actually change completely. If you started out thinking about, okay, my creative fee, or even worse, my day rate is I'm coming out of Columbia College and my day rate's going to be, I'm going to be ambitious, I'm going to set it at $500 a day. And that's insanity. That's just this arbitrary number. It has no meaning at all. It's what is the real value of the photograph. The value of the photograph is everything. And you need to charge based on the value of the photograph. And one thing that I will actually tell you guys that you should keep in mind in all of your thinking about this is that if a client comes to me and asks me to bid a job, and they come to you and they ask you to bid the very same job, there are subtle things that would differentiate the two of us. My experience, I've got a whole lot more experience. But in general, if they're willing to get you engaged to put in a bid on making a photograph and they're doing the same thing for me, that puts us in roughly the same ballpark. So you should not be thinking that, okay, I'm just a freshly graduated student from Columbia College, I'll bid it at $500 because I'm just hoping to get anything. No, you need to be saying to yourself, well, what is Verser going to actually be bidding on this job? And if you know that Verser is going to be bidding $5,000 on this job, you're an idiot if you bid $500 for this job. I'm telling you that right now. Because the client is expecting, if he's asking me to bid on it or she's asking me to bid on it, they're expecting to get a $5,000 creative fee thrown at them. You should damn well be pretty close. Now, you may want to underbid me somewhat, and there's value that I can bring to it that you can't. I've got a whole lot more years doing that, and that has a value to it. So I'm not trying to exclude that. But what I'm trying to say is that you should damn well be close. I mean, I would, in your shoes, I would never consider doing anything less than $3,500 if you knew that I was coming in at $5,000. Because otherwise you're just going to be laughed out of it. So people will just go, well, that's crazy. I would never even consider using them. They're only wanting $500. You can underbid too. That can really be to your detriment as well. Does that make sense? So all of these things, this is a huge number of these issues that you've got to actually take into consideration. But there's one thing else that I want to talk about before we ultimately get through all of this, and it goes back to the whole copyright thing. So we talked about the work for hire issue. That's something that you need to keep an eye on. We talked about if you're doing this for an employee, that's another thing that we need to keep in mind here. There is another thing, and it's a misconception. You will hear this all the time. People will hire you and they'll say, we want a total buyout. Total buyout means nothing. It's a very flawed phrase because legally it actually means nothing. What they are probably asking for is a transfer of copyright, which you can do. You can actually sell somebody your copyright for the work that you did. However, again, that comes under potential usage. What is the value of this image that you are actually going to transfer to them? But the term total buyout does not really exist. So if the client says to you, yeah, I want a total buyout on this, you come right back to them and say, are you asking me to transfer my copyright to you? Because what that transfer of copyright will then mean, again, is that you cannot use your images for anything. You can't use that image for promotion. You can't use it for a website. You can't use it for an e-blast, for an emailer. You can't put it in your portfolio without their permission because you've transferred the copyright to them. Make sense? All right. So again, we need to consider in this whole big cornucopia of things how we actually get our hands around or our minds around or anything else around this whole idea of usage and how we bill for usage. And that is in large measure the two remaining issues that we'll probably spend the rest of all of our classes on is number one, how you determine usage, and number two, how you construct a good bid, a good estimate. Those are really going to be the issues that we've got here. Those are the things that are in front of us. We've got to deal with the usage issue first because that is directly That is the foundation and beginning of your bid, right? So in terms of doing that, we need to think about the different types of photography. And what goes to core here is this, is again, you need to divorce the photograph from the usage. So I can shoot a photograph of somebody, it takes me 15 minutes to do it. That thing can be used two completely different ways. It could be used for some local designer's website only, and nobody knows who that designer is, and it's worth $50. Or somebody else could be a world-class designer that wants to use that as the new everything for a new ad campaign. So it's in every advertisement of every magazine, it's on every billboard, it's in every storefront, it's in every point of purchase display, it's on every mailed out card, it's all over the world. Same 15 minutes to do the same photograph, but worth wildly different values. So our job now is to try to figure out how we figure out the value, again, this is not about the time it takes, this is all about the value of the photograph. So there's three typical categories that we're going to talk about that you have to start. It's a way to try to break this whole thing down. The first thing would be commercial. And what commercial photography really is this when you are really hired to basically generate an image that is for a product. And it's usually done for advertising. It's usually a contract or an assignment photography. That would be what we're going to call commercial. Commercial is a very big umbrella. The second category that we need to think about is editorial. Editorial, by and large, is journalism. It would be used for magazines, newspapers, that kind of stuff. And then the third category that we're going to put in here would actually be called retail photography. And in retail photography, again, you are hired by somebody to do something, but it's specific to one thing. So for instance, wedding would fall under retail photography. It would be a good thing to think about. Wedding photography would actually be retail photography in terms of thinking about this. As a general rule, commercial photography commands a higher rate. One of the issues about commercial photography, the reason it does command a higher rate is that you're usually engaged with people who are doing this all the time. So again, you're working for, I work for Bonton a lot, I work for Neiman's a lot. They're doing this stuff every day of the week, 365, they do it 255 days out of the year. It's constant, it's ongoing, it's all done by freelancers, it's all done by experienced freelancers. It's just constantly going on, and that tends to be the highest of the rates. Now, within that construct, there's even higher and lower rates. So what I typically do is mostly catalog work. That's not the top end of the scale. Advertising is the top end of the scale. So what Stephen Meisel does is makes a whole lot more money than what I do for the same people. But at any rate, the next one down in our three categories between commercial, editorial, and retail would be retail. And the reason retail is worth less than commercial is because by and large, again, you're doing it, people are hiring you, people who are not buying photography all the time. That's who you're really working for. It tends to be an event thing, or it tends to be one-offs. It's not this like constant flow of work. So the value of it, again, and the amount of exposure it gets, most weddings don't get splashed all over the pages of magazines and put up on billboards and all that kind of stuff. So by and large, it's inherently worth less because the usage is actually inherently worth less in the arena. And then finally, there's editorial. And editorial, even though it has a huge exposure, much bigger exposure than most retail would, simply the money that's involved in it is just, it simply is not there. So the truth of the matter is editorial pays the absolute worst. However, editorial can make you as a commercial photographer. The reason Stephen Meisel can charge $75,000 a day in creative fee, no usage, creative fee, to shoot pictures for Prada is because he does and has done every single cover for Italian Vogue since fucking 1979. Not one exception. Anyway. Any of you guys, some of you guys have been through my Fashion 2 class, right? Anybody? No, we really start talking about how much money Stephen Meisel actually really does make in that. Well, when we get to usage, remind me to show you about what I think Stephen Meisel is really doing. So at any rate, that's the first way that we can sort of begin to get our heads around usage. Again, you're not going to be able to do the very same picture that you would do as a full-blown ad for Prada and sell it to Vogue and get the same amount of money. The picture, and it's exactly the same picture, but the Vogue is going to pay you $1,000 for it. Prada will pay you $750,000 for it. Make sense? Okay, so that's the first thing we actually need to start thinking about in terms of all of this. So I want to show you another way that you should consider this. So I'm actually going to show you a chart of something really quickly. This is actually on our Moodle site, I hope. I know it is, I'm just not sure where it is. Yep, here it is. Can you guys see this thing right here? It's sort of hard. Again, this is on the Moodle site, so you can sort of come into it. This is exactly the chart that I was actually telling you guys about in terms of thinking about these three different branches, commercial, editorial, and retail. And you can actually go through it, you'll see examples of it. So again, in commercial, it's not just about advertising. There's corporate stuff that actually happen in here, public relations, that would all happen here. Editorial, again, textbooks would fall into this as well. And then here into the retail part, school portraits, that kind of stuff would actually sort of fall into this category. But in terms of thinking about usage, this is the next thing that I want you guys to think about. Because again, I'm going to come back to this one in just a second. I just want you to look at this scale right here. So this is one of the reasons that usage becomes so critical in terms of thinking about it. So we're going to look at the very top example right here. This is actually pictures that were done by, does anybody know Stephen Gross? He's actually one of the top wedding photographers here in Chicago. But at any rate, in Stephen's case, what he did, again, he shoots tons of weddings, and I'm going to ask you guys if you actually do this. When the people in this room who shoot weddings, do you actually get releases from the bride and groom when you shoot weddings? You do? A model release. An actual release to use their imagery. You ever think about it? So in Stephen's case, he has all his, if he can get it, and pretty much everybody does it, he has all his people. So this is sort of a hard picture to see, but basically it's a picture of this is a bride and groom, and they're kissing, and it's like, this is a card, this is a reflection. Can you sort of make out what that image is? Okay. You can actually bring this up on your own little site if you want to see a closer version of it. So it's on week 2. It's the it's in the A. Here, I'll find it again really quick. It's the resolution of it is no good. So I'm as big on the screen as I can really get it. So it's maybe a thing that's easier to find. So yeah, I mean I can, but it's the ASMP licensing guide from week 2. And it's down, it's called The Power of Licensing. Is that better? You can see it on the screen a little bit better, right? Okay, so see the bride right there, kissing the groom right here. This is the back of a limo, I think, and it's reflecting trees. This is actually a window or something. I think that's what's going on here. Anyway, so Stephen shoots this thing. He actually gets a release. He has them sign for it. So the wedding is photographed for this. He has the model releases. He's kept them on file. He then turns around. He can actually sell this, puts this up into a stock site. An editorial client actually picks this up, and they use it in Bride magazine. He's paid again. He was paid for the wedding. He's now paid again. He actually puts this into stock again, and he gets this as in a commercial thing. This thing gets picked up for print advertising for MetLife. The highest holy grail of all, the people who pays the most money, advertisers, fucking insurance company. They buy his picture. He made more money doing this than he did the original wedding shooting. I can promise you that. No. Yes.
So if in my wedding contract, it says that I am honoring some images.
Yes.
Any money that I make on the images outside of the wedding.
Right.
Is for me.
It's a very smart thing to have. I would somehow what I would consider adding to your contract though would be an official model release.
I do.
It can be in the language. I wouldn't necessarily have it as a separate piece, but if they sign that and they're signing your model release, then you are golden, girl, because you have now got all of this imagery that you can market.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is.
But again, this gets back to this whole idea of usage, the whole idea that I'm trying to get you out of the mindset of you get paid a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time to go shoot away. And then you can then make money on the prints. I'm trying to push you way beyond that and to say that those images inherently have value, and the value is not in the time it took you to do that. The value is in their usage, how they're used. Right? Yes. Is it beginning to sort of click a little bit? So there's another case right down here. Let me scroll down a little bit so you can see this guy. So in this case, it started out in a completely different fashion. This actually started out as a commercial thing. This was an assignment for an annual report for the Bank of America. Again, anything that you would shoot commercially, you would have model releases for. And we haven't talked about model releases yet. We might get to those tonight, we might not. But the long and short of it is this. Without a model release, nobody will buy your work. Nobody. They will not touch it. Again, they're too liable. They can come back and get you. And so, again, if you want to sell an image, I don't care who it is, magazine, commercial client, it does not matter. If it has people in it and you do not have a release, they will not touch it. It's radioactive. So it's worthless to you. Yes?
So you have to give them a copy of the release, or you just keep it on file?
No, you would keep it on file. They may ask a copy to prove that you actually do have it, but it would be something that you would be expected to manage, and you keep that record on file. So at any rate, this starts out as an annual report. He then actually sells it here. We go over to here. This is his stock license. It gets picked up for a textbook. And then finally, it comes over back into here. He ends up doing this whole greeting card thing. He publishes this whole set of greeting cards, whatever. He uses it himself, and he makes money again there. 3 different usages again. Started as a completely different enterprise. It started as a commercial assignment, but he milked it all the way through. Editorial and retail as well. And then finally, this last one down here, this started actually as an assignment. By the way, I don't vouch for any of the quality of the photographs that we're actually looking at right now. Just saying. This starts out as an assignment. It was for, this is an editorial assignment. It started out for an article on California wines in Gourmet Magazine. But then he turns around and he sells it for stock, and it actually gets picked up by Expedia.com. That's his commercial use for it. Have any idea what Expedia would pay for an image that they're going to use? I mean, that they care about? Totally will blow that editorial rate out of the water. And then he turns around and he actually also sends it out here into his stock. And believe it or not, this actually got sold as a fine art print. Yeah. So at any rate, but the point in this still being is that it had nothing to do, it didn't focus on the time it took him to go shoot this picture for the initial assignment that was involved here. It transcends all of that. You stop forgetting about the time it takes to make the image, and you start thinking about the money, the usage that you can actually get out of it. So within this, and this is actually a lot of the lecture that you're getting tonight is coming from this article. So it's things that you should consider actually talking about. Or make sure that you actually read this stuff. I know that this is very reading intensive class. I've already told you guys that, but it's just worth it. That's all I can tell you. The difference in who you will be in 5 weeks or 4 weeks from now and who you are when you got into this, night and day. Okay, so we've already talked about buyout. Buyout is a term that comes up in usage. Again, it's a very imprecise term. Nobody uses it. People would talk about transfer of copyright instead. If a client, and this happens all the time, and this is a great negotiating tactic for you guys. Every client that I've ever had in my whole life that I can remember has always wanted to buy more than they needed. I worked for Jockey for years, and they insisted on essentially transfer. They insisted on unlimited usage, which basically is not a transfer of copyright. They could use the images forever, but they paid for that. They bought my first house. They way overpaid. It was for packaging that they knew their packaging. They turned that. I mean, they changed that. The product, number one, changes every 3 or 4 years, if not sooner. The packaging, they changed that every couple of years, but they were buying my pictures and paying to use them forever. And we were like, okay, sure. I swear to God, my agent, the one I told you about, the one that was the really good negotiator, she looked at me and we were talking, we had been negotiating with this art director, and the art director was like, well, I really don't see it as being that or whatever. And I just looked at her and I was like, well, that's how our pricing structure has always been, and it's, whatever. And She goes, well, all right, whatever. And my agent is standing right behind her. So I'm looking at this art director, and my agent is right behind her, and my agent is laughing like a fucking clown. I mean, she's just like, she's trying to hold it in, so she can't. But she's looking like Hannah right now, but she's trying not to let this client hear this because it's just absurd. It's like, she was like, okay, well, yeah, we insist on buying it, so we'll pay you that. And it was just like, so instead of buyout, the term most people would use is this. A true buyout would imply that you are transferring copyright. We've already talked about what that is. What most clients are really looking for is unlimited usage. And what that means, and that's a better advantage to you guys if you give them that, what that means is that they are actually going to pay for unlimited usage. It means they get to use it anywhere, as much as they want, as big as they want, as many times as they want, for as long as they want. You giving them you charge them for this. That's a whole lot more usage than, okay, I want to use it one time in one magazine for 1 month. That's a completely different issue. Again, all of these issues about usage come into play here. So the more it's going to be used, the more value it has to them. The more value it has to them, the more expensive it should be to them. Yes?
So limited usage, you still own the right?
You do, and that's the difference in a transfer of copyright and unlimited usage. You still own the copyright, so you can still do these things. You can still sell it to everybody else. You still get to use it on your website in your own promotion. You get to do anything you want to with it over and above what they have paid for to do this. So in many ways, it's the best of all worlds because it will be the most expensive usage that you ever get, unlimited. And then you can continue to use it if there's any way that you can continue to market it. So that's one of the issues that we've got to talk about in here. The next one we're going to talk about this is your creative fee. So what is your creative fee? Well, we've already talked about this in the simplest of terms, but I'm going to add another twist to it. In your creative fee, what you really need to think about, and hopefully this will help set you guys on the right path, is number one, the absolute bottom of that, foundation basement of that needs to be your cost of doing business. But then there's a kicker that comes into this, and the kicker that comes into this is your creativity. What are you bringing to this that nobody else is going to bring to this, or that I'm not bringing to this, or that somebody else is bringing to this? So you say to yourself, okay, by a minimum, I've got to clear $350 a day to actually make a living, to pay my rent. I'm not going to save anything, but that'll pay my rent. However, I have been doing this kind of work for 5 years now. I am incredibly creative about this. I can actually bring this job in. I can not only bring it in on time, I can bring it in under budget. I can guarantee them that they're going to have imagery that they can use. I can bring a whole lot to this. That is worth something. Whatever it is, that is worth something. Now, this has got, again, nothing to do with usage. It's your expertise, your talent, your gift. It's all of those things. That is a tangible thing that has value that you have then got to add to your bottom line cost of doing business. Does that make sense? That is your creative fee. It's got nothing to do with time. It's strictly what you are going to charge to do the job. Usage is going to come on top of that. Because again, we've already said this, I know I've said this 1,000 times, I can do the exact same picture with the exact same person, and it gets used two completely different ways. In one way, it's worth very little money, and another way, it's worth an exorbitant amount of money. It didn't take me any longer to do it. It didn't take me any more creativity to do it. It didn't change any of that. So what makes for that adjustment is what you're going to charge for the usage. Make sense? Okay. There are other things that come into, so what we're ultimately talking about now is licensing. That's how you actually, when we talk about the term usage, the way that's actually going to be transferred to this other person, to this client, is a license. What you give them is a license to use your pictures this way or that way. Does that make sense? So the license is the specific spelling out of the usage. You get to use the picture for this, this, and this, and this, and this. Make sense? In that licensing fee, there's all sorts of things that you get to charge in there, or things that are going to have an impact on that. So your creative fee is one of them. Is your license exclusive? So for instance, there are everybody who shoots for, all the models who shoot for Estee Lauder, they can't do cosmetics for anybody else. It's got to be Estee Lauder, only Estee Lauder. Well, you've got a model who's, you know, who does only beauty, whatever. Estee Lauder's paying her $1 million, but L'Oreal could use her as well. But Estee Lauder says, nope, you're going to be the Estee Lauder girl. That's called exclusivity. That has value. So you can market in your license exclusivity. Do you want exclusive right to use these pictures that nobody else, I can't sell them to anybody else. You get to use, they are made for you, exclusively for you. Even if it's only a restricted period of time, I will never sell these to anybody else. I'll use them in my portfolio, but I will never sell them to you. That is worth value. You can have limited exclusivity. You can say to them, well, nobody else can touch these pictures for 6 months. But after 6 months, for the first 6 months, they're yours and yours alone. But after 6 months, I get to market this to anybody. Or a year, or 2 years. All of this, you see where this is beginning to go here, guys. We're starting to break this down. We've long ago left you sitting in the studio making pictures, shooting pictures, that kind of stuff. We're now in the realm of talking about, what are you going to do with this? How do you want to be the only person who gets to do this? So again, going back to the L'Oreal contract, usually exclusivity, which happens for pretty much every beauty ad or every beauty that's ever done, whenever the models are all exclusive. And it's usually a doubling or a tripling of the contract. So they start out at $1 million for the usage, but then exclusivity doubles it or triples it. All of a sudden, she's $3 million for it. And now I know some of you are thinking right now, $1 million, what bullshit? Nobody's doing that. You are so wrong. You are so wrong. There's so much money in this game. It's staggering the amount of money that's in this game. But you got to know how to go after it. You got to know, and it's all of this, all these other issues that are around all this. What do you charge for a day? I'm sorry, I don't quote for days. I quote for my intellectual property and how you're going to use it. What? Yeah, that's what I charge for. I charge for your use of my intellectual property. And I would love to talk to you about every imaginable way you could do this. So, exclusivity. Again, the whole licensing, we've actually talked about this. The other issues that we've talked about all of this would be time, location, the number, the size of it, all that kind of stuff. We'll get more specific about that in just a second. However, there's other issues that are going to come in, terms that are going to actually come into this. Just as much as you can have exclusivity, you can also have non-exclusive. The general consensus is that if you don't specify exclusive, it is a non-exclusive contract. Then there are other things that are going to actually charge that we need to talk about really quickly that are going to come into the way we ultimately do our billing. And it's a set of terms here, so I'm just going to throw these out to you really quick. There is post-production after you do the shooting. Now, for you guys, most of you understand post-production. It would be the retouching. It would be all of that kind of stuff. That is separate and different and completely apart from your creative fee. That is not a part of your creative fee. Unless you're a retoucher and you're marketing that way. Somehow, what you do is all in post, then that could be considered part of your creative fee. But for the most part, it's developing files, file delivery, all that kind of stuff. There is pre-production. Now, some photographers actually do their own pre-production. Most photographers actually hire somebody else to do that. But again, that would be set building, set design, meetings with clients to actually go over. It would be casting. It would be all of those kind of issues would be in pre-production. There is actually a production fee. It would usually, what I do anymore, because I don't do this, I don't have time to do this, I hire a producer who takes care of these things. So the producer is the person who books the hotel rooms, buys the airplane tickets, does all of that kind of work. She's got a charge all on her own that's independent from either post-production or pre-production. We've already talked about unlimited usage, and we've also talked about usage fee. Are there questions about this? All right, we're going to start getting more into the nitty-gritty part of it all here in just a second. I'm going to touch on it really fast tonight because we've only got about 20 minutes left. And then we will get into it in great detail next week. So I want to start talking about just the beginning parts of it right here. In most scenarios that you guys are going to get into and all of this, whatever, it's a kind of a three-step process. In most cases, you're going to be asked to put in an estimate, a bid. What's it going to cost me to do? How much is it going to cost me to hire you to do the work? The second phase in all of that is you actually get confirmation from the client that you've actually been awarded the job. When you get that confirmation, you would want a lot of this in writing. Again, there are examples I've got here of contracts that you would use to get the assignment, to actually have them commit to the assignment. Usually they'd add a purchase order to that as well. So it's the commitment to the assignment. Then finally you shoot the job and your invoice will go out. The language that you use in your licensing occupies all three of those. It's on your estimate, it's on your confirmation of assignment, and it's also on your invoice. So when we're talking about all of this kind of stuff, again, what we've really talked about that's going on here, what a license is really designed to do is, it is the contract that specifies the usage. So in a typical contract, in all typical contracts, there's a number of things that you have to have in that contract. The first thing you would actually have is the parties. You and the person you're doing it with, right? You're basically the licensee. You're the licensor, they're the licensee. They're the people who are buying the license from you. They're paying for the license. You're the person granting it to me. You actually then need to spell out the permissions. What do you get to do with it? What is the real usage? Do you get to do it for this, for that? How long, this, that, and the other? Are there any constraints on this? Are there any restrictions for this? Are you going to sell your image to somebody, to a magazine? They publish Chicago Social, but they also publish Screw magazine. So you're selling them the rights to the picture that you did of Bailey in her bathing suit. And it shows up in Chicago Social as an ad, or not an ad, but it's a cute girl on the beach. It's spring in Chicago, right? And that's great. But then they also use it in Screw magazine, and it's like, hey boys, how about beating off to this? You would limit that by putting a constraint. Sorry, Bailey, I really didn't mean to. Okay, no, the reason I bring this up, I swear to God, this is a true story, true story, true story, true story. Because I've got to explain this. So, when I very first started shooting here in Chicago, I went to the Art Institute, and I hated it. But anyway, I was at the Art Institute when I got a job assisting at Playboy. And I worked at Playboy, and Playboy was really good about, you can use the studio and gear to do all this kind of stuff, and I was interested in shooting fashion. So I would approach the agencies here, you have, why don't you fashion goods and all that kind of stuff, whatever. And they would send models on go-sees over, but I was at the Playboy building, so they would come to Playboy. It was always they were a little reticent about some of that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I actually got an assignment to shoot test covers for Playboy. They wanted to shoot test ideas that they could run for a half an hour. And if they liked the ideas, then they would actually flesh them out and shoot them in a bigger way. But they were going to pay for all of it. So, and it was cover stuff. So there was no nudity in it. I mean, they were suggested, but there was no nudity in it at all. And one of the agents said, so this comes up. She'd gone, a bunch of girls had come over to go see. And I bring this up to her, and she said something, oh, I've got real reservations about doing this. I'm struggling. I'm not sure I want to let these girls do this, blah, 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 this and the other, whatever. And I swear to God, that day, we used to get every magazine from all over the world. I mean, every magazine. And they would make the rounds to the office, and everybody had to initial the magazine that you'd seen it, and then it would go on to the next. They were really held up to determine that you were visually literate. And one of the magazines they had was Screw magazine. I swear to God, it actually was a magazine. And inside the inside page, not the cover story, but the inside page, was a collection of all these composite cards from this agency. It was an agency here called David and Lee. And it was all the girls that I had been wanting to shoot for Playboy, and inside was their composite cards, and a lot of them had lingerie stuff on there. And the headline over the top of it was, hey boys, how about beating off to some prime meat?
Oh my God.
So I sent this to the agent, and I said, believe me, I will treat them better than this. And so they were like, oh my God, whatever. They ended up actually suing Screw Magazine, which was a joke because everybody sued them. But anyways. But she ended up giving me the girls to actually shoot for the cover test stuff, and that's how I went. Okay, so there can be constraints as a part of your contract. There can also be requirements in your contract. You can stipulate things both ways. You can say you can't do this with it, but you can also say you have to do this with it. You have to give me a credit line. That would be a requirement for that. So another thing, any conditions that you actually want to put on top of that would all be spelled out in your licensing. The image info. Again, all of that kind of stuff would actually be part of it, and any other relevant information that actually plays out into this game. So I'm going to show you a site that I want you guys to look at. You don't have to do anything with it right now, but I just want to show this to you to sort of plant the seed in your brain right now to take a look at this. It's actually, there's a link to it on our website. It's actually called Plus. It's this guy right here. It's the Picture Licensing Universal System. This is all about it. This is their, I think this is where they are. This may just be them. Yeah, no, this is where they are. They also have a license generator. It's just, we're just going to a page on their website. And how do I zoom in on Safari page? Is it Command plus? It wasn't Shift plus. Okay, excellent, right here. So this thing is to help. It's free. If you actually want to do certain things with this, you have to register with them, but they don't charge you anything. This was actually sort of the product of a group of photographers back in the late 80s and early 90s, and they were the first people that were really had come up with this whole idea of usage. Because before then, it was exactly what you guys think it was. Before then, it was all day rates. That's all it was. And these were the first guys that really pioneered the idea of usage. And so I just want to show you a quick version of how this sort of like looks, just so that you get some sort of idea about this. When you go here and you start in this, this is going to actually help you generate a license and how it would actually be. You simply look here in the beginning of how you would all sort of like start this thing out. So in our case, what we would actually do is it lets you pick up stuff, whatever, but I'm going to select custom media and usages and options right here. This is the one I'm going to pick. You can go ahead and do this with me if you guys got this thing open. So this is where it would start. There are two versions of this. There's the basic version, and when you see the basic version, you're going to wonder, oh my God, what is going on with the expanded version? That's just insanity if I'm doing the basic. If you click on the Start Basic, this thing will come up, and you actually need to fill this in really quickly, or otherwise it won't let you get to the next page. So if you don't want to put in your information, you can put in any bogus information. It doesn't matter. I'm going to actually put in mine. So again, the end user in this, and this is actually two different things. So in a lot of cases, you will actually, especially in advertising, you get hired by an advertising agency to do a job for another client. So what they're asking for here is the end user. So let's say, for instance, I was going to do this for General Motors. This is actually real clients that I do. So I'm going to put in General Motors. Yeah, I know. And do you see my typing skills? I'm like, anyway. So the person who's actually going to do the licensing of this would, God, who's this? I'll just put in Ogilvy. And then the licensors, oh, actually, these are wrong. These are flipped. I'm the licensor. Ogilvy Mather is one of the largest advertising agencies in Chicago. Oh. And then hit continue. Okay, what's wrong with my URL? Is it colons first? I mean, yep, there you go. Okay, so then you get into this thing and you start talking about what it is you think is going to happen. This is going to be your first experience to usage. So I want you guys to go in and just make up a job to actually go through this, but I want you to see what's actually happening. How will the image be used? So you get a drop-down menu, and depending on what you answer here controls where things land next. So again, in my case, I'm going to say this is for General Motors. This would be for advertising. Boom. Specific use, okay? It's going to be on their website. And I would start right here on their website. If you've got more than one of these, you fill this all out again. This is going to be the A usage right here. So I'm going to say, okay, let's say I'm going to do this. What I actually shot for them was their marketing material. It was their annual report. And the details of your stuff, the details of your usage. And I don't know if they're going to have annual report down here, but you see how this all gets, right? I'm going to just say all marketing material types. Then in what format will this image be distributed? Well, that would be printed. Where will the image be placed or positioned? And you see how this begins to go. Is it a single image that you're going to place on the inside? Is it the back side or the front side? That would actually be what we call back and front covers. Are there going to be multiple placements of this work? Or is it going to be any of these things? Well, I'm going to give them any of these things. Now I'm starting getting into the unlimited usage realm, right? How big is this going to be? Well, again, I was talking to you about this before. These are going to be up to full pages. So again, single or multiple versions of this. Am I shooting a single image for them, or am I shooting a whole group of images that they actually are going to use a whole lot of? So I'm actually going to say multiple versions. How many copies will be printed? Actually, I did this for them, and since it was 2 million copies, I'm going to put any quantities of copies here. What's the duration of this? You guys get where this is going. This just keeps going on and on and on. So I'm going to say up to 1 year. That would be for an annual report. In what region will this image appear? You want to know how you start making money? You don't charge $500 a day to show up and take pictures. You generate licensing usage fees. Is this making sense? Okay. Well, I'm just going to then hit all to go through this to get to the end of this really quickly. Look at this, languages, all of this. Exclusivity, is there any exclusivity in this? This will be non-exclusive. And I'm going to hit save. And it says we must, you first select the following usages to proceed, region 1. So I've got to pick a region apparently that I was, oh, in what region? Worldwide. Okay. That's going to be the whole part when we get into what you need. That's the whole second part of this lecture, is what you need to be doing. Because yes, you've got to find all of this information out there from them before. There's no way you can actually do a bid. If you don't know this information, or worse, if they don't know this information, you can't generate a bid for them. You simply can't do it. And you got to tell them that. Because it's another game a lot of clients will actually play, is they'll grossly, they will get you. This happened to me actually shooting for, who was the big Ponzi scheme people out of Michigan? Vitamin people. Huge, no. I'll think of it. Anyway, they asked me to bid on a 3-week booking, and I did. And then they gave me a week of it and wanted me to do the week at the same 3-week rate. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. And they'd already sent the clothes. And I was like, well, as soon as I get them, I'll send them right back. And I did. Anyway. Yeah, okay. So we're going to go on here. So you can go in and you can actually add or change the stuff you can edit, or I'm going to hit continue here. And this is my first usage. And now it's going to say to me somewhere in here, I think, do you want to do a second usage in this? I may have had to do that on the page before. Yeah, so I'm going to go back. Oh, by the way, you don't get back buttons in this if you open this up. No, you don't get them in if you open them up in the our Moodle site. The window doesn't give you back buttons, so you actually have to go back in time right here. So again, I'm going to hit continue. And I think it's add. Oh, you're right. So this is now my second usage, because they're not only going to use this thing as a printed thing, they're actually going to use it on their website. So again, it would still be advertising, but now I'm going to pick my second one, website, and you keep going through this and you see how this thing tends to explode. However, every additional thing that you add on this is worth money, right? The simplest of these is not going to be worth a whole lot. The one that was really quick, it's one usage, it's not very big, it's local, it's only for a few copies, you write it really fast, it's not worth that much. You start getting into this shit, worldwide usage, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff, the usage just explodes. Once you generate all of this, you get two things. You get an XM, here, I'll show you what you get, because I did one of these last night. You actually get an XMP file, And this XMP file, this is what this is it right here. I'm going to actually open this up in a text editor so you can see it. It's very hard to read, but I'll show it to you anyway, because it is a text file. But this is an XMP file. So this is actually what you embed in all of your pictures. Yes. So it's got everything about it. It's got all the licensing, everything that's generated in here. Again, if you'd filled in all this information, it would actually all be in here. You can see somewhere up in the top. Yeah. So at any rate, if you want to actually read this thing, you look at, this is their embedder and their reader. It's an application that will actually do that. So if you double click on this guy, it's going to say, do you want to open this guy up and read the license? And I can actually select this guy and we will read, we'll see what mine reads. So it's this XMP file. I'm going to open it up. And we're actually going to read the license. It's going to ask me to browse again for that, but it's still selected. So this gives you basically, this is one I did last night, so this was for the Bonton Corp. But you can't really see the usage, how it's completely spelled out here. You just get who the licensee, all this kind of stuff. However, this is the code for the license right here. If you click on view the media, this is all the media is spelled out right here. So I know what you guys are thinking right now. You're just like, I don't think I'm coming back to class number 3. Right? We're planting the seeds right now. Okay? All of this is going to grow in your mind. Do you have to go to this length for every single job that you do and everything you do? Of course you don't need to do that. Do you need to spell out licensing, though, and what your usage really is? Absolutely. So what usually happens on my invoicing, it happens on my estimates and my invoicing as well, I actually make a list of the licensing. And I just say, one-time usage, 6 months, US only, website included, whatever. I mean, I just spell those things out. It's how most people suggest that you actually write your licensing. But the idea that you know that that exists and that you know that you should be charging for that, and that the more, or again, the larger the usage is, think about this. The larger that usage actually is, the more value that is to who's ever using it, right? If I sell a picture to Bonton and they use it on a website and a back page for one thing, and that's all it's for, it's just to show somebody who's shopping online, that's all it's going to be for, that is very little usage to them. So it's very little value. They're going to pay me very little for it. On the flip side, if they use it on a catalog that they're putting out that they're actually going to print, it becomes the splash screen of their home page. It becomes a direct mail piece for them, and it also is all their in-store signage and posters and all that. They're using the shit out of that, and it's worth a whole lot more to them. If it's worth more, they should pay more. You guys all said to me in the beginning, you want to survive, you want to make money doing this. This is how you make money doing this. Are there questions about this? Okay, I promise you next week it'll be different. I'll see you next week.
I know.